technical and organizational measures that a company can undertake to ensure that they're constantly through some of the various laws in Kenya that cover data protection and privacy. And we also looked at the key objectives. And one of the things I was saying is that companies should not look at these laws as hindrances to undertaking or carrying out their business. So one of the key objectives we looked at was that the Act came to regulate this processing of personal data and also to establish legal and institutional mechanisms to protect this data. We also went ahead and looked at some of the principles encapsulated under Section 25 of the Act. One of them was the principle of lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. We also looked at purpose limitation so that you ensure as an organization you collect data for a specific reason. There was also so that you ensure as an organization data collected is for an adequate and relevant purpose. We also went ahead and looked at some of the registration requirements for data processors and controllers, and we saw that there are certain companies operating in certain areas that require to be registered. Yeah, these are companies dealing with political canvassing, gambling, educational institutions. So just to sum it up, basically these are companies that are continuously processing personal data on a day-to-day basis in their operations. We also looked at the process of the registration and some of the documents you need to have. After that, we went to see what are the rights of data subjects. One of them was the right to be informed, the right to access your personal data, the right to object to the processing of your personal data, and the right to deletion if in case you're not comfortable with that personal data being processed. We also looked at the right not to be subjected to a decision based solely on an automated processes. And I'm going to just share some headlines that are going on in our country and some of the things that are happening. Then we also looked at the obligations of both data controllers and data processors. And the reason why we are having this webinar today is that one of the key objectives of these data controllers and processors is that they need to ensure that they have sufficient protective measures and provide sufficient proof to the data commissioner that they've undertaken appropriate safeguards with regards to the transfer of this personal data or even the processing of this personal data. We also went ahead and looked at cross-border transfer of data, and we looked at the three key principles that you need to satisfy as a company or as an organization. One was to ensure that you have appropriate safeguards. That is one, of course, showing how you're going to comply, whether you have the requisite security within your organization. Two was an adequacy decision made by the data commissioner. So as I mentioned, they publish a list of countries and territories and specify sectors within that country that have been approved where you can transfer data to, so that they are complying even with the GDPR and other data protection laws. Thirdly, we look at the principle of necessity. So if you apply for, you want to transfer data from one country to the other, you have to show that it's necessary, one, for the performance of maybe a contract, matters of public interest, and to exercise a legal claim. And lastly, we saw key and very important, you need to get consent from the data subject. We also went ahead and looked at the data protection regulations. One is the complaints handling and enforcement procedures. And we went through how you can lodge a complaint and the processes in place under the data commissioner's office to ensure that these complaints are handled and they are assessed. Then we finally looked at the penalties that are in place, one of them being monetary fines, and the others were imprisonment. Lastly, we looked at the approach that organizations can undertake to ensure that they are continuously complying one of the key things we mentioned is that you need to come up with a roadmap. That is a strategy on how you're going to comply within your organization. Then you also need to create awareness within the various departments, since these are also stakeholders and they are processing data within on a day-to-day basis. Then lastly, we looked at how you can embed privacy by both by design and by default within your organization. So I believe it was a very enlightening session. So today with us, what we are going to cover is some of the security, how you're going to undertake security of personal data within your organization. This requires you to come up with technical and organizational measures to ensure that when you're processing this data, you're complying with the act. So with us today, we have Mr. Protas Agufa. Mr. Protas is a budding change agent and technology strategist. He's passionate about positioning technology as a business driver for SMEs. He's also worked with 50 different SMEs and multinationals over the last 15 years with the aim of affording them enterprise class IT representation that can bridge the gap without doubling cost while managing the associated risks. Karibu sana Bwana Protas, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome and introduction. I'm just working on getting my screen shared. Hope you can see my screen. Great. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a privilege to have just about 30 minutes to take you through what I think is a very important subject. And it is our intention to make sure that that time is of value to you. We've already gone through my bio, so I think without further ado, what we'll discuss today is basically around the top security threats to your business operations and data protection. So we'll basically work on talking about that. And then we'll also mention the number one security risk to your business most companies are not properly addressing. We will also go ahead and mention the layered security and defense in depth and how it can help. And then we'll go ahead to outline the elements of layered security and its importance. Then the 7 layers of layered security. As Anthony has mentioned in our last webinar, and also with the introduction that Mary has just given, both her and Laibuta expertly took us through how the Data Protection Act imposes strict data security obligations on organizations that process personal data and require them to report data breaches to the data commissioner within 72 hours, and in some cases to the individuals affected by the data breach. So this is why we are having this, because the regulation is upon us and we need to comply. And I know Anthony's team shared out recordings for those who registered but were not able to attend. And we'll be willing to share the same with anyone here who did not register for the last webinar but would still like to watch it. So maybe I'll just start by touching on exactly what a data breach is, which can also be referred to as a personal data breach or a security breach. A data breach occurs when personal data held by an organization is lost or subjected to unauthorized access, modification, disclosure, or other misuse or interference. And so, because of that, I would like to take it a bit, to bring it a bit closer to home, because a lot of people feel data breaches don't necessarily happen to a country like ours or to small businesses. And I was just looking at the past news headlines over the past national news headlines over the past 3 months, and I came across these 3 major ones. So The first one was why cybersecurity insurance is a must-have for businesses. That was a Business Daily publication on the 5th of September 2022. Then there's Hackers Find New Ways to Access Your Secret Accounts. That again was 11th August 2022 by Business Daily. And then, of course, we all know about the IBC systems being hacked, or so Philip Murgor said in the last general election. So this just goes to show you that this is not necessarily a foreign concept. It is therefore important for business owners and IT practitioners to understand the current threat landscape. And to this end, the Communications Authority of Kenya issued 7.9 million advisories in the year to July 2022, up from 93,696 last year, in an attempt to curb the rising attacks. I mean, that was a big jump. Yeah. In the first half of 2022, more than 14,000 users in Kenya were affected by threats, hiding in browser extensions at least once, which is over 59% of the number of users affected by the same threat throughout the whole of 2021. This was said by Anton Ivanov, a senior security researcher. And then according to data by the Central Bank of Kenya, hacking attacks on Kenya's financial systems, including mobile banking, rose nearly threefold to 444 million in the year ending June 2022. This was a sharp jump from 158.4 million a year earlier, as more people worked from home, ordered products online, and made payments via mobile phones as a common practice, which is a common practice by most Kenyans. And I'm sure we all relate. The question that to ask yourselves this morning is, where do you bank your money? If your answer is not under your mattress, these statistics should really concern you. So what I'd like to appeal to all of us here is to beware of complacency. Success in the context of our discussion today is that you might not have been attacked yet. Yeah, you might be sitting there and saying, but this has never affected me. Or if you are compromised, the consequences weren't significant enough. Therefore, because of your recent success in not being a target yet, you've become complacent about the security measures in your organization. But a famous CEO of Intel, former CEO of Intel, called Andrew Grove, famously said that success breeds complacency and complacency breeds failure. Only the paranoid survive. And I tend to agree with this. And I hope many of you will agree too. So it is important to realize that we are not too small in a far-flung and consequential country to be a target. These larger companies have very sophisticated security systems in place. They are not easy to hack. Therefore, if they are getting hacked, getting into your business is a cakewalk, which is why you're a bigger target than these larger institutions. The prize might not be as big, but you are far too easier to rob than larger institutions, making you a prime target. And since cyber criminals have automation tools, they can make a large sum of money simply targeting a few hundred or thousand small businesses. So in fact, according to data by Kaspersky, a cybersecurity solutions and service provider, small businesses in Kenya face a 47% increase in cyber attacks in 2022. You just don't hear about these attacks because, one, they don't make the national news. The news want to focus on big stories. Second, most small businesses don't know they have been hacked or don't report it as they should because they are embarrassed or afraid of the legal and reputational consequences. However, we are bound to hear more such cases as the DPA gets enforced, and businesses are required to inform the commissioner when they suffer a breach or alternatively face significant sanctions. So which part of the statistics do you want to be? That's the question that I would want you to pose yourself today. I'm hoping everybody can hear me just right and all is going well. So I'll continue.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So I'll move ahead to basically just discuss about consequences of a data breach. In addition to the significant sanctions for failing to take appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect data, and potentially for failing to report a data breach as required by law, organizations might suffer, among other things, loss of stakeholders, trust, reputational damage, and disruption of business activities as a result of a data breach, leading to economic losses. In addition, there are significant costs associated with managing a data breach and remediating the damage caused by the breach. It is just not the value. It is just not the value of the data that is important. Therefore, investing in data security to prevent data breaches, such as those caused by cyber attacks, and being prepared to respond in the event of a data breach is therefore worthwhile, not only to comply with the legal obligations, but also to avoid negative consequences for the organizations and its stakeholders. So some of the examples of the top security threats to your business operations and data protection are loss of theft. It is just as simple as that. We've all encountered somebody, or we've been part of losing a notebook, a phone, a USB drive. And unfortunately, if you did not encrypt it and it fell into a bad actor, I mean, you will be basically in breach of the current laws. Yeah, and I'm sure many of us can already relate to this. It gets as simple as that. Then ransomware is another. Here, an attacker encrypts data with a malicious code and then demands a ransom in exchange for the decryption key. Yeah, so this one, I'm sure a lot of us have had it, maybe not necessarily experienced it, but you can imagine waking up in the morning and you cannot access any of your data for your company. It can really be mind-boggling and sad. Yeah. The other one I want to touch on is on business email compromise. And this is a specific type of phishing attack, a spear phishing attack to be precise, with the objective of being tricked or tricking employees into taking harmful actions, typically sending money to the attacker. So in spear phishing is a more targeted version of traditional phishing. Here, hackers spend time getting to know you via social media, and then an email is sent from your manager or the CEO in attempt to deceive you or extort you money from you, or gain access to privileged credentials or other sensitive information. This type of attack mainly operates through your email impersonification, and I'm sure we've all engaged in some of this type of attack in one way or the other. And some of us have been wise enough not to click on any link or open any attachment on that particular email. But some have not been so lucky. And it can end up costing companies as much as 10 million to 100 million Kenya shillings upwards in this kind of attacks. So just to expound more on phishing and spear phishing, according to Kaspersky, attacks related to data loss such as phishing and social engineering have skyrocketed in Africa in Q2. In fact, in Q2 2022, growing by 234% comparison with the previous quarter. So that basically means in the second quarter of 2022, phishing attacks grew by 234%, yeah, higher than the previous quarter, Q1 of this year. The company's security solutions detected more than 10 million phishing attacks across the continent in that second quarter of 2022. Kenyan users have been affected the most by this type of threat. In fact, there are more than 5 million phishing attacks detected in 3 months. In those 3 months of Q2, a growth of 438% when compared to the previous quarter. This is half of the total phishing attacks of Q2. That is how serious it is. So of the whole continent, and of the whole 10 million plus phishing attacks that the continent received, Kenya was targeted by half of those in a space of 3 months of phishing attacks. That is how under siege we are. So the number one security risk to your business when security is actually people. Yeah. So if you have staff members, the more you have, the more at risk you are. Your staff are actually your weakest link, because when security breaches make headlines, they tend to be about nefarious actors in another country or the catastrophic failure to technology. No matter the size of the scope of a breach, usually it's caused by an action or failure of someone inside the company. So somebody inside the company uh, could very easily have opened a door, a crack in the armor that you've placed around your company, and allowed that bad actor inside in one way or the other. So your people are the biggest risk. So after after hearing all this, the question you may be asking is just how do you protect your business against such overwhelming odds? This diagram shows the inverse relationship between the amount of security protocols your organizations deploy and the number of skilled hackers likely to be able to pull off a successful hack of your company. Basically, what it means is that the more security layers you have, the more skilled the hacker needs to be able to penetrate. The fewer levels of security you have, the less skilled the hacker needs to be, which basically means more people playing that level of lower skill set than it is when you have more security measures in place. And I think this particular diagram just paints a good picture of what you're trying to talk about. So layered security and defense in depth, how can it help? So the current threat landscape has advanced to a level where multiple advanced attacks vectors are waiting to exploit vulnerabilities within applications, interfaces, networks, devices, traffic, and users to damage businesses. Relying on one business security solution will prove to be useless against sophisticated attack vectors such as this. So having various layers of security increases your chances of being able to protect yourself. Think think of state house even. You have a gate with dogs, with alarms, with policemen at the gate, with a fence, probably with an electric fence. Then you have cameras inside, and so on and so forth. So as you go in, there are more other layers of security going in. So if we are able to protect our houses to that level, how much more should we protect the businesses that actually contribute heavily to our social well-being? So layered security and defense in depth. Just continuing this topic and explaining more what it is and the difference between the two. Yeah, layered security and defense in depth are two similar yet distinct concepts. So defense in depth aims to deploy multiple security measures to address various threats related to the entire IT infrastructure. While on the other side, layered security uses different security products to address a particular security aspect, such as email filtering. Because no security tool or measure is flawless or guaranteed, both concepts presume the attackers will or have already breached different layers of the organization's defenses. The goal is to provide several layers of protection to identify and stop attackers at every stage of the attack cycle, thus enhancing the security defensive system's effectiveness. Well before, well before focusing on, so sorry, at this particular juncture or in this particular webinar, we'll be focusing on layered security in this presentation. So what are the elements of layered security? So the three elements of layered security are prevention, detection, and response. Security policies, controls, and processes should all be devised and implemented during the prevention phase. The goal of detection is to discover and notify a compromise as soon as possible. A quick response is crucial for the detection phase to be meaningful. So why the elements of layered security are important? Cybercrimes have shot up by almost 300% since the start of pandemic. And that's the reason why prevention is very critical. The question to ask yourself, therefore, is can you afford to be the next victim? The average time to identify a breach in 2022 is 207 days. That is how long it will take you to identify that you've been breached. Reducing detection time is therefore critical for limiting damage. In 2022, again, the average time to contain a breach was 70 days, which follows that the longer the response time, the greater the impact, because this guy is just sitting there waiting to find out what will be the biggest way he can be able to compromise you at the end of the day. So the 7 layers of layered security, what are they? So layered security is divided into 7 layers by security experts. Hackers seeking to get into a system must break through each layer to gain access. As a result, every information security expert should concentrate on improving these 7 layers. So the first one is information security policies and security awareness training. Here we focus on what we identified earlier as the #1 point of weakness. By converting them into a strongest link, we'll give them all the information they require and all the training that they require to enable you, your organization, adopt security policies that prevent unauthorized access. Having robust security policies and training helps avoid data breaches and raises security awareness within the organization. So that is how that helps. So the second one is physical security. This is basically what I'll talk about in your home, where you have multiple layers of security, starting from the gate, where you have a dog, you have an electric fence, you have cameras, you get to inside the door, you have access control system, and so on and so forth. And basically, that is how you should protect your servers. Server access, office access should always be secured with key cards, badges, access control systems, CCTV cameras, just to be able to control who has access to to those sensitive areas. Network security is another. The goal here is to prevent unauthorized network access. In today's world, where teams work from anywhere and everywhere, implementing a zero trust policy is paramount. This requires all users, whether in or outside the organization network, to be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validated for security configuration and posture before being granted or keeping access to applications and data. The other one is vulnerability scanning. Every system has vulnerabilities, but you can reduce this risk by keeping your operating systems, third-party applications, antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-spam, and file software up to date. A vulnerability scan finds out if something is outdated and risky so that you can take action before cyber criminals do. And of course, the more the computer users you have, the more complex this situation gets. You might be feeling that you already have a protection solution in place, but the question is it up to date? Is it susceptible to any form of vulnerability? Do you have a way to test that? So that's basically what this addresses. Identity and access management ensures that the right people and job roles in organizations have access to the tools they need to do their job. The goal here is to make unauthorized access near impossible. So this basically just controls access to tools, to resources, depending on the job roles and levels, so that ultimately those who need to have access are the only ones who have access at any one particular point. The other one is proactive protection and reactive backup and recovery. Proactive protection detects and fixes security risks before they lead to a full-blown breach. The goal of reactive backup, on the other hand, and recovery is to recover quickly after an attack. Earlier, we mentioned that the faster a data breach is identified and contained, the lower the damage cost. And that basically is what this addresses. The seventh and last layer of led security is to keep threats at bay. Revolves around keeping threats at bay. It is therefore critical to stay vigilant. There is need to have a solution in place to evaluate your internal and external systems for risks, review your policies with you, and constantly monitor, test, report, and notify you about possible issues. And this will be done 365, uh, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Basically, it should be an automatic uh, way of doing this, so that at the end of the day, you're able to, to be very quick in identifying whenever there is any form of breach, and cut the 207 days that it takes to detect a breach and reduce it to an even lower number. So that's my bit, Anthony. So probably we can take any questions that are there um, and attempt to answer them.
Thank you so much, Curtis. I mean, that presentation was very, very in depth. Those numbers were shocking. Maybe I can start off with the questions, and should anyone have any questions, please feel free to drop them in on the chat, and we'll be able to address them as we go. So you mentioned that, I mean, out of the 10 million cases in Africa, Kenya was targeted by half of those. May you have any insight as to why Kenya had the highest number of attacks? Yeah, so any insights on that that we can be able to prepare for and be able to protect ourselves?
So I believe as a country, we've embraced technology in a big way as compared to the other countries. If you look at advancements like M-Pesa, we are the first country to embrace that form of mobile payment very quickly. So we embrace technology very fast and make use of it very fast as compared to many other countries in the world. So for me, I would say that's the number one reason as to why that's the case. Uh, yeah.
Okay, all right, great. And it also mentioned like our employees are still like our weakest link. Um, is that mainly because of lack of awareness? Is it malicious? Is it on purpose? Yeah, so could it be one or either or both?
Yeah, it's actually one of the either. Uh, it's all of the above. You see, at the end of the day, when you're working and you're receiving many emails, you are looking at your inbox, it has 100 emails. You just want to go through them very quickly. You see something that is giving you access to 10,000, or your boss has asked you to book a flight or respond very quickly, and you're doing it in a hurry, and you end up clicking on a link. And that link introduces a backdoor into your system. So at the end of the day, it could be just a scenario whereby maybe because of lack of that awareness of how it is you can be threatened, the many ways that it can happen, uh, the aspects where you can pick up flash disks and just in the office lying around, and because maybe you need to transfer a file, you plug it into your machine. It just takes one person. So you can have very many security measures that you put in place. The more the staff members you have, so let's say you have 100 staff members, it takes one to make a mistake and your whole castle crumbles. And that's the reason why your people are your biggest concern, because it just takes one of the many to make a mistake and the guy is in.
Thanks. So I know not all of us here are techies or like technical IT and can be able to do this by ourselves. What can you advise as maybe the first uh, like easy to simple solutions that we can be able to start with, maybe for our businesses, and then what can we able to do going forward to lead on to have our data better protected. Yeah, so what would be like the low hanging fruits for us? what that we can be able to stop data breaches from in our organizations?
So I would say the low-hanging fruit will be security awareness training. So just having regular trainings with your staff members, just to enlighten them on what is, in the various ways that they can be susceptible to such threats, probably will be one way. The other way is maybe implementing, I mean, if those statistics for the number of email attacks that I just presented are staggering. So probably also having an email security platform to just be able to help your employees to better identify emails that have maybe malicious links or have come from impersonators. That could be another way. So just enabling, for me, it will all surround, it will surround, it will be surrounded on enabling your employee to be your biggest security weapon or layer of defense.
Okay, all right, thank you, Protos. I can see there is a comment from Pepper requesting that we can share the presentation. Yes, we will share the presentation and the recording as well to everyone that registered and everyone who is actually here but was not able to, that registered and wasn't able to attend. Um, and so maybe I can just take a question, give a question to Mary. From a data security, from a data protection side, we're meant to notify um, the office, the data protection office, in case of a breach. What would happen, or what would be, I guess, what would happen to an organization should there be a breach? And Protas has said it took them 207 days to notify the breach, to get, for them to be able to identify that there was a breach. So at what point are we supposed to notify them when the breach happened or when we noticed the breach, which maybe is that 207 days later?
Thank you so much, Anthony, for your questions. So one, when are you supposed to notify the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner? So you're supposed to notify them of any breach within 72 hours. After these notice. So one of the things that happens is that they receive this notification, and also they'll look at the things like, did you get consent when you are processing this data? Also, had you done what we call a data protection impact assessment? And then you also need to provide ways or mechanisms as to how you're going to curb this breach. So yes, under the laws, it's supposed to be within 72 working hours.
And right, so in the case that Protas had mentioned, where it takes many organizations for them to notice that there is a breach way after those 72 hours have lapsed, does that still, is the organization still liable for the penalties that you had mentioned?
Yes, the organization, of course, would be liable, because I'm imagining you'd get lawsuits from data subjects whom were whose data you are processing. So yeah, basically what I'd say as an organization, and as Protas mentioned during his presentation, is that just make sure you're taking up organizational measures and technical measures to protect this data. But then again, we live in a never-changing, a dynamic world where risks keep cropping up and you can't anticipate them. So yeah, just basically coming up with some of those measures would help you as an organization. I can see there's Emerald's hand is up, so we can give her a minute to ask the question. I'm not sure, Anthony,
Sure,
whether
Emerald,
she's able to unmute herself.
Emerald, I'm not sure you can unmute yourself. Maybe you can put your question on the chat. I can see two others here on the chat. So I'll start with Polycarp because it's similar to what I was asking. He said that the 72 hours, is it once the breach has been established? Because he's looking at it a breach can be seen a month after it has occurred. So when does that 72 hours begin?
So looking at it from a practical perspective, of course, the 72 hours won't be from when the breach happened, but rather when you as an organization, you become aware that, yes, we were hacked and our personal data is at risk of being used wrongly. So it should be 72 hours after when you as an organization, you realize that you've been breached.
Yeah. So maybe if I can just also add to that, yes, it is 72 hours after you've identified that you are breached. However, the longer it takes for you to actually identify that you are breached, the more severe the repercussions, because it basically means the breach will be even bigger the longer it takes for you to detect that. So the obligation is not only towards informing or notifying the commissioner, it also goes towards the other repercussions that come as a result of that. And that is where it even hits even harder.
Okay, all right. Thanks. Thank you, Protas. Thank you, Mary. Emerald, you should be able to unmute yourself. You can ask a question now if you're in a position to.
Anthony, there's a question from Joshua on the chat. He's asking how effective are firewalls in detection of breaches. I think Protas can handle that.
Yeah, so firewalls are a part of the network security layer. So I mentioned the network security layer. So firewalls actually are part of that, and therefore play a very big role in protecting, play a very big role in that layer. But of course, as I've just mentioned, it is just one of the layers that you need to have in place to make sure that you are consistently becoming even more robust in terms of your protection. Of course, some of these measures you cannot implement all of them at one go. The best way to go about it is to start now, so that and then budget it over a period of 2-3 years. So if you have a partner who can walk that journey with you, they can be able to guide you on where to start and spread that capital investment over a period of 3 years so that you grow into it. You might be able to get everything at one go, but you can grow into it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks, Protas. The Emerald's question coming in now. But she says that businesses are now turning systems in a bid to scale their business. Businesses are now turning to systems in a bid to scale their businesses. What are some of the red flags or green flags to consider when identifying a system for your business?
Red flags or green flags? Well, that's a very wide topic because it depends on what do you want the system for. I guess that will be the main issue. What do you want the system for? Number two will be what type of data are you handling? Because there are aspects to do with data sovereignty that will come into play because of Data Protection Act. So if that data is resident outside outside the country, and depending on the nature of that data, it might actually be in breach of the regulation that is coming into play. So it just depends on the nuances of that system that is being implemented. So probably is to find out more in detail exactly what are you trying to achieve and what are the nuances behind it.
All right, thanks, Protas. Emerald, I hope your question was answered. You can be able to perhaps just share, Protas, maybe you can share your contacts and we can be able to reach out to you with some more clarity on that. Once Can't see any other questions in the chat. Okay, this is yes. So yeah, so if you have any other questions that are coming through, then Dr. Samtra, once you share your email address, which is there on the chat, you can be able to reach out to him directly, and we can be able to answer that. There are some of us that joined in a little bit late, towards the tail end of our webinar. So don't worry, we'll share the recording with you all and the presentation as well, so you can be able to follow at a time of your convenience. And again, should you have any questions, then you can be able to reach out to put us on his email address. And I can see Mary has also shared her email address as well. So at this point, I'd just like to give it to Mary. You can be able to wrap it up for us.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much, our host presenter for today, Protas. So globally, sorry?
No, I was saying thank you. Continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so globally, approximately 72 pieces of data are collected online for each person before the age of 15. For most social media platforms, their business model is designed to gather as much information or data about people online. So this data is used to make money through targeted ads based on your search history or online activities. However, if not well handled, the information could be used for cyberbullying, cyber predators, posting personal identifiable information, which ultimately affects your well-being. So I know most of you who joined us today are wondering, as a business, how can Adept come in to assist, and what are the various ways that services they can offer to me as a company or as an organization? So at Adept, we offer high-end data protection services, ranging from regulatory and compliance, cybersecurity, which helps organizations build cyber resilience from inside out. So our services range from one, training. This is awareness training to employees within entities that process personal data. Two, compliance and regulatory advisory. Three, registration services for data processors and controllers. Four, data protection manuals and policies for your company. Five, data protection impact assessments for companies that are going to undertake high risk projects that are processing personal data. And finally, data security and risk management support. So Protas and I have both shared our email addresses, and I know Anthony is going to share the company social media handles so that in case you really want these services, then you can reach out. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much to our audiences. Over to you, Anthony.
Thanks so much, Mary. And thank you for that very great close-up. Protos, once again, thank you so much for spending your time with us and just really giving us on how we can be able to protect our businesses. As we are wrapping up, October being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we found it very fit that you were to end our month on a high note. So thank you so much for that, and we're really grateful that you were able to just give us tips on how we can be able to protect not only ourselves but our businesses as well. Mary, thank you so much as well for your time. We appreciate you having spent last week and this week with us as well. For all our listeners from wherever you're joining us from, Asante Nisana, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of us that again joined us a little bit late, we will be sending the recording and we will be sending the presentation. If you do watch a recording and the presentation from last week, please feel free to just send us an email on marketing@adept-techno.com. Just going to type that on the chat. Then once you let us know that you prefer to get a recording from last week, then we'll be able to share that with you. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day and nice weekend ahead.
Thank you, Anthony, and bye-bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.